Hello there this afternoon. This is Phil Dixon coming to you live with an edition, a special edition today. This is not the regular This Day in Black Baseball History. This is a special edition. And right now we're going to be talking about an all-star team. Let's talk about an all-star team. And because I think so many of you don't know who some of these African-American baseball players are, I thought I'd spend a little time with you just kind of discussing some of the players and some things that I think you might find interesting about some of the players. So we're going to take a 1927 All-Star team, and this All-Star team was selected by Bert Gholston, and he was an umpire in the Negro National League. So this is his list of Negro National League players that he thought would form a perfect all-star team in 1927. So let's take a look at it real quick. All right, let me get this thing going here and get a little water here. All right, it's a kind of interesting list, and especially when you look back on it, based on what we look at today. Okay, so let's start with his selection as manager for this team. He selected his manager, William Gatewood. Now, William Gatewood was a great pitcher. He was also manager, had been manager in 1923 St. Louis Stars, and he lived 1881 to 1962. Passed away in Columbia, Missouri, but he didn't live in Columbia. He lived in Moberly, Missouri, and I presented in both of those, so I've had an opportunity to talk about him. He is buried, however, in Columbia. So that is Bill Gatewood. He selected as his manager. And I've seen some reports that said Bill Gatewood has something like about 20 no-hitters. Now, I've been able to find about 8 or 9 of those no-hitters. So it's a lot of work that I got to do to find some of this information. So Bill Gatewood is his manager. And of course, this is the 1927 All-Star team. And in 1926, he had been manager of the Albany Giants, Albany, Georgia Giants in the Negro Southern League. So he thought well of him. Now, what's interesting is that Gholston did not pick Dave Malosher, whose team would go on and win the World Series that year and beat the Bacharach Giants 5-3. So I thought that was kind of interesting that he picked Bill Gatewood. But hey, he was there and I was not. And so, hey, I'm going with his selection on this. All right. So now he picks three right-handed pitchers, and actually 4 right-handed pitchers and 2 left-handed pitchers. Okay, in his pitchers, the pitchers that he had for his all-star team, first of all, will be Wilbur Bullet Rogan for the Kansas City Monarchs. Okay, good choice. Bullet Rogan, at that same time, he was a manager as well, a playing manager, awfully good player for the Kansas City Monarchs. So he pitches him as his right-handed pitcher. I won't spend too much time on Rogan because I talk about him all the time. And of course, Rogan lived in Kansas City, Kansas. That's where he was raised, born in Oklahoma City, raised in Kansas City, Kansas, my hometown. And of course, he passed away in Kansas City, Missouri there in the 1960s, mid-1960s there. So Wilbur Bullet Rogan, I happen to know actually, I know his family. So I'm always honored to talk about him. I do have a great book on Wilbur Bullet Rogan titled Wilbur Bullet Rogan and the Kansas City Monarchs. Somebody wants me to stand up. I'm going to stand up, but I can show you my jersey. This is a Leland Giants jersey from 1910, all right? And I just happen to have my Monarch hat on. Somebody thought it was a Memphis Red Sox, but it could be a Memphis Red Sox too. So, all right. His next right-handed pitcher from the Birmingham Black Barons, and by the way, Bill Gatewood was manager of the Birmingham Black Barons in 27. But his next pitcher is from the Birmingham Black Barons, and it's a guy by the name of Harry Simon. And Simon originally had a nickname of String Bean, so I guess he was a pretty slender guy. He lived 1895 to 1983. And started out in the Negro Southern League, was with Birmingham in 1922, 1923. When they came to the Negro National League, he came with them. Of course, back in those days, Joe Rush was the manager of the team down in Birmingham. So you're going to get quite a few Birmingham players that are on this team as well. Another one of his right-handed pitchers would be, let's see, uh, Ted Trent. Ted Trent, Mr. Curveball. Ted Trent followed this guy quite a bit. Ted Trent is buried in Borough Oak Cemetery, but he was one of the great curveball pitchers. Excuse me, originally out of Florida. Let me get some water here. Something went down the wrong pipe. Originally out of Florida, so that's Ted Trent, and that's going to be one of his right-handed pitchers. I might clear my throat again. Another one of his right-handed pitchers is going to be Sam Streeter. Now, Sam Streeter actually interviewed Sam. Sam, once again, a guy from Birmingham in that area. He ended up being on the 1926 Homestead Grays. So he was there with Cumberland Posey. And he was also a college grad. I need to do some research. For some reason, I'm drawing a blank on what college he was with. So I need to do a little more research. You guys, if you know the answer to that, go ahead and send me a little note on Sam Streeter. And I remember I was trying to get a picture of Streeter for my book when I was writing in the Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History. And he had had a house fire and lost all his pictures. So he didn't really have anything that he could send me. So, but he is pictured on the picture that says 1935 Pittsburgh Crawfords, which is really the 1934 team. And he's pictured in there. So he did autograph a number of those for me. And way back, I sold a number of those. So maybe some of the collectors who have Sam Streeter's autograph came from me selling that photograph that he signed a number of those for me. And that was Sam Streeter. So he was picked on this team, and Sam Streeter is, in that particular time, a member of the Birmingham Black Barons. Of course, in 1927, he goes on to do some wonderful things, and he bounces around a little bit. I was looking at something when I was doing a little research on Sam, and in August 26, the Pittsburgh Courier mentioned that he was 23-3 at that point in the year, and that was Sam Streeter, 23-3 at that point in the year. So this guy might have won 30 games there in that year. Of course, 1927, he goes to Palm Beach down there in Florida playing winter ball, and but he also had been other places. Been, like we said, with the Homestead Grays. In 1928, he was back with the Grays. 1923, had been with the Lincoln Giants. He was later on with the Pittsburgh Crawfords. Good guy. Man, it was amazing to talk to Sam. And he passed not too long after that. I think Sam died in 1985. So I was blessed to be able to talk to Sam. Okay? I'm going to say somebody else. Let's see. Somebody's talking here, and I guess we got some haters on the place today, so we won't say nothing about them. But if everybody who's enjoying this, just say hello, and that would be good, okay? And so we're going to get this one guy. We're going to retire him. I think he needs to be removed, all right? We won't worry about him, and we'll get rid of him. All right, okay. So now here's the thing. When I'm giving this history, there's always people who maybe don't care about this history. There's people who don't care about American history. They're just living and surviving. But those of you who care about history, you're in a good place because we talk history here, okay? All right, let's keep on going. Let's keep on rolling with it. Okay, so we had Ted Trent, okay, and now we're going to go through his left-handed pitchers. One of them is going to be Willie Foster of the Chicago American Giants. Of course, Chicago American Giants in 1927 were world champions. So the ace of that staff was Willie Foster, the younger brother of Rube Foster. If you followed Negro Leagues, you probably know that. This guy was 6 foot, about 190 pounds. And he batted right and threw left, kind of interesting for a pitcher. And he broke into ball, professional baseball, in 1921 with the Memphis Red Sox. And of course, that was Bubba Lewis's team. And I did get a chance to interview Bubba Lewis's widow. And I had a chance to know Willie Foster's family. And Doug Foster his grandson actually follows me online, and we do a number of activities together. So that's Doug Foster. So yeah, the Foster family is alive and well, and still an active part of this whole Negro League baseball scene. All right, the other left-handed pitcher, well, the other left-handed pitcher was Sam Streeter. So the pitchers were Rogan, Harry Simon, Ted Trent, Willie Foster, Sam Streeter, and how about this? We have one more right-hander, a guy named Harold Yellow Horse Morris, formerly of the, let's see, uh, he played, okay, so Harold, he played for the Pierce Giants in Oakland, California, but he also played for the Vallejo Giants out in California as well. Uh, and that is before he went to the Pierce Giants. So he joined the Kansas City Monarchs from the Pierce Giants, okay, Pierce Giants. And so Yellow Horse Morris was later traded to the Detroit Stars. So in 1927, Yellow Horse Morris, Harold Yellow Horse Morris, was selected as a right-handed pitcher from the Detroit Stars. Okay. Now he has two catchers on his list. One of these catchers is going to be Frank Duncan from Kansas City Monarchs, and the other one's going to be Larry Brown. Now I happen to have talked to Frank Duncan's family on many occasions, and then also Larry Brown's family as well. I interviewed his widow down in Memphis many years ago, and if you look at my book, The Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History, you'll see some wonderful pictures of Larry Brown in there. And so Larry Brown, yeah, so Larry Brown is the guy that he features as catcher. Larry Brown was a great throwing catcher, and he played on a team for 2 years that I happen to think was one of the all-time great African-American baseball team. It's the 1932, 1933, more so, Chicago American Giants. I think they are probably one of the top teams, and they would go right along with the 31 Homestead Grays, the 1910 Chicago Leland Giants, the 1905 Philadelphia Giants. The 1933 Chicago American Giants has been a sleeper. Been talking about it for years, and at that particular time, Larry Brown was considered the greatest catcher in Negro League Baseball. Okay? Then Frank Duncan, who was very similar to Larry Brown. I know players told me that they were the same types of catchers. They had their mitts wrapped real tight, so when a pitcher was throwing hard, you could hear that mitt popping all over the park. And so they were the same kind of guys. Both of them had great arms. Both of them had long careers in the Negro Leagues. Frank was married to a lady who, oh shucks, I'll call her name. She was a singer, and she went by another name, and I'll call it in a minute. I'll come back to that. But yeah, he was married to her, and so many times around Kansas City, she was better known than he was. So, but that was Frank Duncan, and I am his. I guess it would be his Frank Duncan. I guess it's like his great grandson. Could be his grandson. His grandson follows me. So his great grandson probably does as well, but we don't really know his great grandson. So Frank Duncan. Now these are names that should have been household names in baseball, right? But these are names we did not know much about because they didn't keep this history going. And of course, they had no help from the history books that we were talking about. So, all right. So that is it. Okay. Now we're going to go to his, of course, Larry Brown's with the Chicago American Giants, Frank Duncan with the Kansas City Monarchs. Okay, now we're going to go to his first base selection. Kind of a sleeper here. It was a guy by the name of George McAllister. And George McAllister, don't hear much about George at all. He lived from 1899 to 1990. And McAllister is selected from the Birmingham Black Barons. He was a first baseman. Ended up with Indianapolis. Started off in 25 with the American Giants in Chicago. Ended up with Indianapolis. Played for the Birmingham Black Barons. Interesting thing, this guy was a first baseman, but not your typical big league first baseman. This guy batted leadoff. Good hitter. And in 1922, he came to Birmingham, and he was part of that infield where they had a guy named Geechee Meredith playing shortstop. Second base was Charles Two Sides Wesley. Now he was married to an entertainer as well, and I think it was Clara Smith that he was married to, and so he's a part of that infield. And then of course, in Poindexter Williams was the manager of that team. Then 1924, Sam Crawford, who was formerly of the Kansas City Monarchs in 1920, being their manager, ended up going and being the manager of Birmingham. So this guy had a good tutorship. I mean, he played for Rube Foster, Sam Crawford, and Poindexter Williams. That's pretty good crew to play with. So he definitely knew what he was doing. So, and I think Bert Gholston knew what he was doing by selecting George McAllister as his first baseman. Interesting choice at his second base was Carroll Ray Mothel. Now, Carroll Ray Mothel, I happen to think a lot of him because he got me started in doing black baseball research. I met him in Topeka in 1980. So I was in my early 20s. So you kind of say, okay, so who else would he not have here? Well, first, he doesn't have Newt Allen, who was actually playing shortstop that year because of the injury to Dobie Moore, and they hadn't really found a replacement for shortstop, so he switched over to shortstop and was playing more shortstop than second base. And you probably say, why not Bingo DeMoss? I don't know the answer, but in Bert Gholston's mind, this was the best. And so that is kind of a little history there. And then we roll down to his, so we got second base, Kansas City Monarchs, Carroll Ray Mothel, buried in Topeka, Kansas, died in 1980. And then at shortstop, no surprise there, it was Willie Wells. Willie Wells is just a fantastic hitter. I was doing some research on a game in 1933 that's coming up in a few days. I'll be talking about it, where Satchel Paige pitched a one hitter and beat this big league pitcher, and the final score was 1-0, and he won on a Willie Wells home run. I'll talk about that in a few days. Then I'll talk about the big league pitcher that they beat in that particular game. It was out in California. So anyway, Willie Wells, no surprise there, and interesting choice, good choice. Now, third base is another interesting choice. He chose Gentleman Dave Malasher. Now, Malasher was a manager, so I think he wanted to get Malasher on this list since he didn't pick him as manager. And of course, the Chicago American Giants were world champions that year, and so he ended up putting Malasher at third base, and his nickname was Gentleman Dave Malasher. And they did not have New Joseph. New Joseph was always strong for the Kansas City Monarchs, who had a good team during that time, but he didn't make the cut. Dave Malasher did. So that is his third base choice. Malasher lived 1894 to 1982. Hey, and if you're ever down by the RBI complex in New Orleans, which is where Malasher comes from, they've got a big picture of him up there on the wall there as you come into the park. So, Gentleman Dave Malasher. So his memory is being kept alive through RBI and through the Major League Baseball program right there in New Orleans. Saw it earlier this year. All right, then, for his outfield, left field, not a big surprise there. James Cool Papa Bell of the St. Louis Stars, left fielder. Wow, what can you say about, what you cannot say about Bell? One thing I'll say about Bell was, I was reading something, they said he can chase a fly ball further than any man in baseball. That means when they hit the ball in the air, this guy was going to probably run 20, 30, 40 steps and still get the ball. Just a great outfielder. And I know I coached for years, and one of the things I would do with my outfielders was I'd hit the ball and see count the steps, how many steps it took for them to get to that ball, to see who could cover the most territory, so I could figure out who I wanted to be my center fielder. Of course, he has him in left field, but he would have been an awfully good center fielder as well, because he covered that much ground. You can have that left fielder and that right fielder out. And I'll show you how important it was. If you saw the World Series this year and you saw that last play where the guy hit the ball and you had the outfielder running who was totally out of position, and the center fielder ran over and caught the ball. Man, I tell you what, if you could look at that replay, count his steps, I guarantee you he ran over 20, maybe 30 steps to harness that ball. And that's how you coach, and that's how you kind of figure out where you want guys to be. If they can cover enough territory, but you also have to be moving at the crack of the bat. All right. So if he's got Coop Papa in left field, who would he pick for center field? All right. So believe it or not, he's got a guy by the name of Sandy Thompson. Now, we really don't talk about Sandy Thompson. I have a picture of Sandy in my book, John Buck O'Neill, The Rookie, His Words, His Voice. There's a good picture of him in there. But there's not a lot of great pictures of Sandy Thompson out there. But Sandy Thompson of the Birmingham Black Barons in 1927 was picked and it's his center fielder. Now, Sandy comes out of Marshall, Texas. I think about another great outfielder from Marshall, Texas, which is Hurley McNair, when I kind of think about those guys. And Sandy, let's see, he started off in 1923 through 25, played for the Birmingham Black Barons. And later on, he ended up managing the New Orleans Black Pelicans for a guy named Alan Page. And Alan Page's son actually follows me too. So interesting history there. But that is going to be his center fielder. All right. Not James Coop-Papa Bell, but Sandy Thompson. So he must have had some speed. These are guys we need to continue to look into their careers and break these careers down, because some of these players aren't getting the recognition that they deserve for the ability that they have. Okay, so if he has that guy in left and center, now you need somebody with a great arm in right field and can cover a lot of territory. His choice is a guy by the name of Walter Still-Arm Davis. And by the way, Sandy Thompson, born in 1895, lived to 1965. But now, it's Walter Davis. That's Walter Still-Arm Davis. Now, I've written some things about Still-Arm Davis over the years in my book, The Kansas City Monarchs, Wilbur Bullet Rogan and Kansas City Monarchs. And Still-Arm Davis actually played with the Kansas City Monarchs and played against a whole lot of big league teams as well. And so he played in 1934 with the Monarchs when they played Dizzy Dean and Dizzy Dean's All-Stars. Still-Arm Davis was in that lineup. And man, this guy hit Dizzy and all the rest of these guys. Subby Bias told me he hit big league pitchers like they were schoolboys. But he had also been a pitcher prior to that, and a pretty good one when he was down in Texas. So that's Still-Arm Davis. Once again, another guy that I think we need to study more on and show this guy's versatility. Just had great versatility. So that's Walter Still-Arm Davis, all right? That's his center fielder. And interesting thing about Davis, when I was putting a set of baseball cards together in 1985, and I wanted to include him because I had a great picture of him, a photograph. And there's a great photograph of him, several, in my book, The Negro Baseball Leagues of Photographic History. But I wanted to feature him. And the reason I did not is because I couldn't find exactly where he passed away. Now, since that time, of course, I know, but he was actually killed in the Indiana Inn in Chicago. That would have been 1941. So, yeah, it was a dispute. Some guy and his girlfriend or something, guy left, came back, and they got, the guy came back, shot him, killed him. And then I think he ran off to Evansville, Indiana, but they ended up capturing the guy who killed Still-Arm Davis. I'm not sure where he's buried. I haven't looked that up. I don't know if somebody's even recorded it. But great ball player. Great. I'm telling you what, put a capital G in front of that great, and then we'll be on the same page, all right? Okay, so we just got two more people, man. This is a big list. One of them is Lemuel Hawkins. Lem Hawkins, okay. He was a former military guy, played with Rogan and all those guys in the 25th Infantry baseball team, former military guy. Came to the Kansas City Monarchs. Ended up staying with the Monarchs through about 26. I remember talking to George Giles, and George Giles came to the team in 26. But they didn't keep George Giles because they had Lemuel Hawkins. And so they were in the process of maybe trying to figure out what they were going to do with Lemuel. But the next year, George Giles came in 1927, and this guy was about 19 years old, and he replaced the veteran, Lem Hawkins. Lem Hawkins eventually got into a life of crime and served some time in Leavenworth, and he was killed during a holdup, believe it or not, in 1934 in Chicago. So, but at that particular time, he was a darn good first baseman, went out to California every year. And I even talked to a lady years ago who married another ball player, but she showed me a ring that Hawkins had given her. And but she didn't marry him. She married another ball player. So anyway, the things you found around Kansas City back 40, 50 years ago is just simply amazing. All right. Okay, so now we're down to our last guy, and they have him down as utility. He could have been the first baseman also. Could have been a pitcher as well. And his name is Edward Ryle, R-I-L-E, and he went by the nickname of Huck Ryle. And he was with the Detroit Stars. And by the way, Lemuel Hawkins was with the Kansas City Monarchs. So you have another Detroit Stars player here. And he lived from 1900 to 1971. And I'd like to do a little bit more research on him. The guy was 6'6". So you can imagine him coming off the mound in a period with a lot of baseball players. I think like Larry Brown was like 5'7", Bullet Rogan's 5'7", and this guy's chunking him up there. He's 6'6". Even today, that's a pretty tall pitcher. But back then, it was exceptionally rare to have a pitcher that tall. They could really bring it. So that is Edward Ryle. And let's see, broke in with the 1921 Columbus Buckeyes under John Henry Lloyd, and 1922 played with the Chicago American Giants on a staff that included Dick Whitworth. Talk about Dick quite a bit. He lived in Kansas City, Kansas for a while. Dave Brown, another guy who got into some trouble and disappeared. Nobody know what became of Dave Brown. But last we know, he was up around North and South Dakota, Iowa, in that area, playing under an alias of Lefty Wilson. And of course, Ryle, 1925, he played with the Indianapolis team. Of course, he was there with George McAllister, right? So some of these guys were on teams together later on. So that is 1927 Bert Gholston's All-Star team, and selected by an umpire. Now, what's interesting, all of these guys, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. We have 18 guys on his All-Star team, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them are enshrined in Cooperstown. But I can make a good argument for about at least 4 more. And so the history and the work continues, guys. So let's keep celebrating this history, and let's keep working. So I'm going to come back probably later on this afternoon. I'll do a version of this day in African American baseball history and give you some events that occurred on this day. And today, what's today? Okay, that's going to be November 25th, Through the Ages. And so I want you to join me on that. So usually I try to get out here in 20 minutes, but when you're trying to cover 18 All-Stars from 1927, it takes a moment. So I want to thank everybody for joining, and I do have some people. Max Fuller said hello, and then I've got, looks like Andre or Andrea Elizabeth, something like that. Elizabeth says hello. Who else I have? Got Clint Torres, and some of these people probably already left, but I appreciate you coming. If you just come in for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 1 minute, guys, I appreciate it. And while you're here, stop by and hit that subscribe so we can keep this going, so we can keep it growing, and we can keep this knowledge flowing, because these are ball players. They meant something to a whole bunch of people, to America, to our great national pastime. And I just want to talk about them, and I hope you enjoy some of the information I'm bringing now. So, guys, this does it for this particular segment, which is the Bert Gholston 1927 All-Stars. And thank you for joining. You have a nice day, and I'll see you soon.